Hey y'all, this is Luke, and we're back with another episode of building a self-hosted analytics service from scratch. It's been, I think, about 2 weeks since my last stream. I've been pretty busy lately, but I'm feeling the itch to work on the app a little bit, so that's what we're going to do today. And we're going to be starting with our, sorry, I'm just taking a look at my stream thing here. Yeah, we're going to be continuing, I guess I should say, with what we started last time, which is the authentication system. So let's get going with that. Authentication and authorization, but for this particular app, authorization is fairly trivial because we're going for a single user approach. So it's mostly just authentication that we're going to be spending our time on. And to remember what we're doing, I believe in the last commit here, I put a description. I guess if we just hover over it here, we can see what we have to do next. So let me adjust the mic a little bit. Okay. So we need to do the hashing of the password before we store it in the database. Server-side session checking, that's the actual authentication and authorization piece that we've kind of built the framework around, but we need to actually implement the session checking. That's very important, obviously. Admin user password change. Right now, the admin user is set with an environment variable, the password is, and so that's fine, but the environment variable obviously is not hashed, first of all, and second of all, I kind of want it to be something where the user doesn't have to set environment variables to run this app. Like in theory, say you're on Windows, you should just kind of be able to double click it and run it. And then that should be sufficient to get going. And then it's going to prompt you to change your password from the default value. And additional routes, that's just something we'll get to as we need them. All right, so let's get started here. I think to start with, we will do the session checking. Seems like a pretty good place to start. And the hashing as well, of course. Maybe we could start with that. So where would this happen? In this user class or module here, we've got a variety of functions. And, we've got functions to look up the user based on username and password. And we've got functions to create a user. And like this create admin user uses this same create user function. We don't have the ability to update a user yet, so we don't have to worry about that, but eventually we will. So let's just define another function in here, function hash password, clear text string. And this will do something to hash the password. Now, I feel like somehow in my mind, I have this like bun.password thing. This object will automatically run in a worker thread. That's interesting. So is it, yeah, so it's async. So there's hash and verify. Okay, so let's kind of just wrap these in some functions here. So this will be, I'm actually going to do sync for these. Text. Yep. Pretty simple. And then to verify password, we'll get a clear text and a hash, which I believe is also going to just be a string. Yeah, it just returns a string. And so this would be verify. I don't really know why there's verify as well as hash. Because it seems like verify would just be doing the hash and then doing like inequality comparison, right? I'm not sure why there's an extra function for that. But since there is that function, we might as well use it. Maybe it's better for some reason. And you know, we're doing this sync here because all of our database functions are already sync, and so everything here is already sync, and I don't really want to change that to async. And we're not really worried about performance because it is a single user application after all. Nothing else is really going to be happening while this is being run, hopefully. Besides events, I guess, incoming events, like visits. I don't know how slow is slow either. I mean, we could make it async, I guess. Why not? And then we could just do this like, don't even really need to change these functions. And then up here, for example, in this one, like this would become an async function. So, I guess we would look up, we kind of need to change how this function works now. And before I forget, I'm going to also update the callers of this function to become async as well. It already is. That's nice. Okay. Okey-doke. Gonna adjust my mic again a little bit. All right. So kind of the thing we need to do now is just be like select by the username only. And this would be user and you know, we don't have the password in here. And then we're going to need to verify whether that user has the right password. And if not, we just don't return it. Is kind of the idea, to maintain the same functionality of this get by username and password while using password.verify. So we would be like const or if verify password user.password hash. And we could say like if user and, just to be clear on that, return user. Otherwise, return null. Something like that. What are you complaining about? It needs to be awaited. Right. Yes, just kind of reading this over. I think that seems about right. Okay, so then in create user here, we're just going to need to do something like const hat. Maybe we could just do it like this. So we've got our data, and then we've also got our password hash. Password hash is data dot. I don't really like that. Also, we don't need that. So what I don't like about this is when you're creating the user, you're calling the field password hash, but it's not. So we kind of need another type here. User with password, which would be omit user password hash. And I guess we would make this an interface. Extends password string. So what we're doing here is we're creating a new interface that is the same as the user, except instead of having a password hash, it has the unhashed version of the password, and that's what we're going to accept here. And then this will just be called password. That way we're not using the wrong field. And we're not calling something a hash when it's not, and it just makes a little more sense. Okay, and this is the only place we create a user is this create admin user function, so nothing else needs to change there. Seems pretty simple. And this get user by ID thing is used like down there, which is kind of a different use case where we don't really need to verify the password at all. It's not used for authentication. Okay, so I think that should be good. And then if we just look at the call side of this again, yeah, that's fine. So with that, we should have basically hashed the username. Or the password, I mean, the user's password. Let's just go in here. I don't think we really need to hash the session tokens. I did mention that in my to-do, but I don't know if that's like a thing people do, hashing session tokens. It feels like a bit excessive because they do expire anyway. So admin at example, I think this stuff is pre-filled from what it should be. Maybe not. Or maybe what I did doesn't work. Let's see, what should the password be here? Default password is this, which obviously doesn't look like that. So let's try that. Still could not log in. Why not? Let's just see what it says, I guess. Just invalid login. Okay, fine. Oh, well, of course, the admin user in the database now doesn't actually have a hashed password. So we need to fix that. Let me go ahead and launch table plus here. And we'll just delete that password from the database, or that whole user. Delete row, and then submit it, whatever button that is, this one. And then restart this thing. Okay, expected string received promise. So I messed something up a little bit here. Oh, this has to be, oh wait. Okay. Oh, and then this has to be async. Yes. Async. Then this should also be async. And this is gonna have to return promise, user. And so is this. And then where is this called from? Over here, this will have to be await. Again, a nice thing about bun, we can do await at the top level. I think you can do that in Node now too, maybe in some of the later versions. I'm not sure. Very nice feature. Okay, so now let's restart this. And if we refresh this, we should have the user in here. And the password hash you can see is the actual hashed version. So it should be able to match. And that's not the right thing that I just pasted in. Let's see. Let's go over here. Yeah, it doesn't matter, I guess. Log in. Okay, what happened now? Invalid login again. So what is console.log password, user.password hash, and let's do hash password, and just see what that has to say for itself. Login. Interesting. So the user.password hash is undefined here, which means it's not finding the user name, which means that, oh yeah, because that should just be admin, right? Okay, so that worked. Yeah, just save that, fine. so I don't have to remember. Okay, let's get rid of this. Cool. So seems to be working all right. We've got our password hashes. And then, the idea here, just to refresh your memory and mine, once we log in, we get this session in our state, this session token. And then our API routes, like this sites example, needs to actually reject requests when there is no session token. But the thing is, we're not actually passing the session token in either. So we need to update our client and our server here. If I'm thinking about this right. So let's do that. Let's start by updating the server because why not? So, we have these two bun.serves in here, and this is kind of actually what we're trying to fix, where one of them is public and one of them is private, and they're on different ports. But we want these to be on the same port. And once we're done with the authentication, we're going to move them into the same port. But in the meantime, everything in this dashboard port is going to be the thing that needs that authentication, except for the root that actually renders the HTML. You don't need authentication to render an HTML, just to get the actual API requests and so on. So we're going to want, some kind of helper function for this, of course. So in this session module here, let's do that. So we'll have like export function, check session, because we already have this get session by token. And let me see, where is this used? Nowhere. Maybe I will rename this to like check session. The thing is, it's going to do a little bit more than just get it by the token. So I kind of want to rename that. So this will be like const session equals this. And so this is going to return the session object. The other thing we need to do is actually update the expiration. So the idea here is the session expires in, I think, 5 minutes or 30 minutes. But if the user is actively using that session, we don't want it to expire while they're using it. You know what I mean? And so each time they make an API request, it should refresh or update the expiration date based on when they do that request. So it expires 30 minutes after the last API request. The last API request that uses that session, I should say. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's actually make a function that's like update session as well. And I might base this on one of our other updater functions. Like if we look at site, is there, yeah, update site. We sort of have a pattern for these creates and updates using like our SQLite, fake ORM, like that we have an ORM at home kind of a thing. Session ID, partial session, and it's going to return a session or null. And so session schema.parse, and this we just need to import, and this becomes session schema.parse. This doesn't need to be like that. Okay, something like that. And then, and I mean, really, this should be kind of like omit. Well, it doesn't matter. Okay, we'll just leave it. I was going to omit the ID from there, but it doesn't really matter. So now up here, we could do like const updated session equals update session, session.id. And we could say like session or null. If not session, return null, right? We're checking the session. If the user just gives us a random token or something that doesn't match the session, then we return null. The other thing is if the session has expired, we also want to return null. And this .get returns the first result, right? So we should check that as well. And there's probably a way to do that in the database, but I'm just gonna, like in our SQL statement, I mean, but I'm just gonna do it on our server code here. So like if not session, or actually let's do a separate conditional here. If session dot expires is less than date dot now, meaning it expired in the past, it's already expired, then we're going to actually delete that session. So let's make a delete session function as well. And again, I'm just going to copy from something else. Delete session, session ID. And that's, everything else is the same. So up here we would do, if the session is expired, then delete it. Delete session, session.id, and return null. So those are our cases where we don't, either there is no session or there is a session, but we don't want to actually return it. And we delete it because that kind of cleans it up, and we'll need to think about that a little bit more later, but I'll get to that later. Okay. So if there is a session, we're going to update it with our new expires, which would be, and maybe I'll just make a quick function for this too, like function get expiration, which is going to do that. And then we can put that here just so that we have the same logic in both places. And then this is obviously going to return the updated session. Okay, something like that I feel like makes sense to me. So the other thing to think about here though is like these sessions are kind of going to accumulate in the database over time, right? So say the user logs in, they do their stuff, they don't click logout, you just get this expired session. In theory, if they click logout, we haven't implemented the logout functionality, but in theory, that would just delete the session. If they don't click that, then the next time they make an API request from the front end, I guess it would try to use that expired session that's still in the application state, and then we would delete it because it would be expired. But what if they don't do that? And they, that application state gets cleared, or they're logging in from another browser. These sessions could sort of accumulate in the database over time. And so I kind of want something that's going to just like clean up all expired sessions at a certain point. And I think that should be maybe when the user logs in. It doesn't need to be every time the session is checked because that's every API call. But it could be when the user is first logged in, like when this create session function is called, we could delete old sessions as well, is what I'm thinking. So let's try that. So let's put it right in here. And let's make another function for this just because, we're trying to encapsulate functionality for reusability. So like delete expired sessions. And then this will delete from table name where expired is less than something. I feel like in Postgres, there's like a current timestamp thing. But I don't know if that works. See, that's not really what we want. Current timestamp. Number. I think it would be this, I guess, Unix epoch. Right? Because that's what date.now is, right? Yeah, milliseconds elapsed since the epoch. Oh, but this is the number of seconds. So really, that should be multiplied by 1,000. It's good to know. Unix epoch times 1,000. Is that going to work? And then we don't need this. We don't really need that at all. Just dot run. So then we would just call that in our create session here. Delete expired sessions. And we can add a note here. Clean up any old sessions. Cool. So we've got our expired sessions deleted here. You know, let's actually do this. You know, see if it works. That's not what I want to do. I have no way to log out, right? So, you know, at the moment, I kind of just have to delete this key and refresh. But I should really add a logout button. Anyway, so if we do this, we do login, we get an error. No such column expired. Oh, right, because it's called expires. Okay, let's try again. Login. It worked. And yeah, seems okay. So let's just take a look at our session in the database right now. Sessions, refresh. So we have these two, which is fine. And what I want to do is, once again, we're going to delete this state and we're going to log back in again. And what we should see is both of those sessions are still there. And there's going to be a new one, obviously. So there will be 3. Yeah, so there's 3 sessions. So that's a good sign. And then we could also do a, how do I do just like a SQL query? Yeah. Select star from sessions where expires less than Unix epoch times 1,000. How do I run it? Doesn't return anything. Now, if I delete that times 1,000, it still doesn't return anything, which makes sense, I guess. If I increase, if I do that, it should return 3, right? Yeah, okay. Sure. Sure, we'll see. Seems okay though. Okay. Great. So we've got our check session function now. And now this just really needs to be called in our controller methods. So like, let's go over here and we could say like, if not check session something, and let's import this, then we will throw, how do we handle errors here? I think we throw, right? Oh, we would do something like this. Return your response, invalid session, status 403. Seems fine. And this would be like rec dot, we don't actually know where this is getting passed in. It's probably going to be a header. It's probably going to be an authorization header with a bearer token, if I were to guess. So, and the reason we don't know, we haven't implemented it in the front end yet, right? So it's not actually being passed in at all. But probably we would want to put it in here. Rec.headers dot get authorization dot trim start. No, I guess we could do just like dot replace, and we'll replace up caret bearer space with nothing. And this is probably going to complain that it might be undefined. And that's fine. Really, this should also be like or undefined. And then we could say like, if not session, return null. Right? Simple. Or not token. Okay, that's good. Yes. So the problem is this piece of logic we're going to need to replicate in all of our functions here, all of our controller methods. And really, we kind of want this to be abstracted into its own little helper function probably. So I'm going to make a function here. And it's just going to be for our server controller method, so we don't really need to export it. And we could call it like verify session. And it's going to accept a request, which would be like a bun.request. Yeah, that one. It doesn't really matter what the type is, so I'm just going to make that a generic type. And this will do this. This is a bit annoying though, because it's returning this response, but really we don't want it to return it. It would be better off throwing it. Yeah, let me think about that for a moment. Actually, my laundry is done, so I'm going to go move that along in a sec. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So options. One option is a higher level function, a higher order function, I should say, that would wrap our controller method. Another option would be to implement try catch and add some kind of error handling thing. Let me see how that works. So let's look at bun serve. How does error handling work? I don't want development server, but I don't think that really matters. Okay, so it does say it will supersede Bun's default error page in development mode. What about in non-development mode? Is this just being overly specific or what? I don't know. Let's see. Let's just see, shall we? So here, that would be like this, if I am understanding this right. Yeah. And then this would be like, you know, I would do like, return response.json. Actually, no. Let's copy this kind of down here and use that as a template. So this would basically, I would just return error.message and status 500 for these. And then we could also say if error instance of response, return error. Is that crazy? Is there like a response dot is, no, okay. I don't think that's crazy, but maybe it is. So then down here, we could actually just throw that. And let's see if this works. Okay, so let's try that. We will put that on this events call here. We'll replace this business here, and we will just say verify session request. So now this API call should require the user to have a valid session. And we want that to be true for all of these except obviously the login one. And really this could also be like throw, just so we're using a consistent pattern here. Okay, let's see if this works or not. I don't know if it will. It obviously, well, it did actually. The UI isn't doing the right thing though, so that's good to know, but we're getting invalid session. So it's returning the right thing. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And then in theory, if I were to like comment this out and refresh, we would start getting these as 500s. Yeah, okay. And this could be like error question mark dot message or unknown error. Right, so now We should get that unknown error. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So that's a thing. We can now just throw our errors. I kind of want to rename this function too. Let's call it something like require user session, just to be a little more clear about what it's doing. Okay. So now our front end needs to start passing that in, and we decided we'll be passing it as an authorization bearer token. The authorization header, if you don't know, in HTTP, it has some like predefined semantics. You know, it's a standard header that browsers use. There's like basic, digest, for different types of authentication schemes that you can put in the authorization header, which maybe should have been called the authentication header actually, but it's called what it's called. And then bearer is just like, hey, we've got this token, whatever it might be, and the server needs to do something with that. And that's kind of what we have here. That token is the session token. And the client is like, hey, I have this session token. I'm sending that to you to authorize myself, to authenticate myself, I should say. Okay. So let's do that then. And it's going to be an interesting one. So this is going to be in our hooks that are doing these API requests. And so we're probably going to want like a wrapper around our API request. And I'm going to make a new file for that called api.ts. And we're going to export function fetch API. And we'll kind of build out the parameters for this. This is going to be an async function, I think. So let's look at like what one of these is doing. It's something like this, right? And we can assume that it will be JSON because it's an API request. So it's going to be returning JSON. And that should be fine. Although we shouldn't really do it like that though. Let's do it more like const resp equals await fetch, like this. And then we will return await resp.json, because we're going to need to add some error handling between these two things. So this is going to take a URL and options, which is going to be request init. So we're kind of emulating the fetch API here. We're just going to pass that through to fetch. So here, you know, it's just not doing anything, right? Anything different from what fetch does, I should say, except that it's automatically JSONifying it. So we can simplify this. And this fetch API, why is it not like, oh, you can import this? I don't know. Import fetch API. Yeah. Oh, okay. So let's make the options optional. Okay, so we can do the same thing down here, you know, get rid of this extra level of await, simplify things a bit. Same thing here. Might as well, maybe I'll do it like that, then like that. And the same thing here, fetch API. This one is interesting because there is no, it's not checking the response at all, but we should still at least return a response. We do, okay, that's good. Otherwise the JSON call is gonna fail probably. Here, again, fetch API. That seems like that might have been, oh no, we returned that down there, okay. Return new site like that, yeah. Okay. And down here, again, fetch API. Yep. Cool. So I think that's pretty much everywhere. If we just search for fetch here, fetch, and okay, so also in use session, but here we don't really need to do the fetch API thing. I mean, we could, though. I don't think it'll hurt anything. So let's just put that in here too. Okay, great. And then this would be like response dot token. Okay, so now we've got this fetch wrapper that we can put our own logic in. And one of the things we're going to need to do is get the session token from the app state. So we could do this with use app state, or we could do it with the use session hook, right? Because this also gets the app state. So let's do that. Like const session equals use session, right? And then we've got our session, which maybe has a token. And so here, we would have our options. And then we're going to override our headers to be options.headers. If there is one, then question mark that. See, the thing about this is, so it could be a headers object or an object literal or an array of 2-item arrays. We don't really want to deal with all of those possibilities here. And our front end is not going to be complicated enough to need them all. Really, the object literal is probably the only thing we're going to see here. So I feel like if I do something like and headers key string, basically saying that now the headers has to be that object, if I'm remembering how and works. Okay. So then this would be, so kind of the point of that would be like if we go over here, well, what are you complaining about now? So I guess it would be or undefined, key string or undefined, right? And that should be ... It's the, yeah. So what are you complaining about now? Property headers is missing. Okay. So now if I were to try and specify headers as an array, it's not going to like that because it doesn't match the key signature for the ANDed, which is like an intersection of the two types. Normally you could do this if this was just plain fetch. Like if we change this to fetch, that is allowed. But we don't want to allow it because it makes our code more complicated and it's not necessary. Okay. So, and maybe I'll make a type for this. Export type fetch API options is that. Cool. Okay, so here we have our headers. If there is an options.headers, in fact, let's just do it like this. ... options.headers and authorization, which really could be upper or lowercase, is bearer space session.token. And we only want to do this if there is an actual session. So it would be like ... Well, just like that. Session dot token question mark like this. Otherwise, no. So this is a pattern that's basically saying take everything from options, and then for the headers object, take everything from options headers, if there is anything. And also, if there is a session token, include this authorization header. Otherwise, don't include anything at all. And you see, if we did it without this .splat thing here, and just did something like this, authorization, I can't spell, but it doesn't matter. Session.token, blah, 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 like that, then the authorization header is going to be set to null or undefined, and it's going to, I think, override the splatted value of the options.header if there is one, and also just be in there when it doesn't need to be. So this way we can just not even set that value in the headers object if we don't have a token. Frequently that doesn't matter. I would imagine fetch is smart enough to kind of not care, but I like to do it this way. Okay, so with that now, what's up with hooks? Why do we have some red here? Is that something we did? No, it's something else. Okay. With that now, if we refresh this, refresh. What's going on with that? I feel like something weird is going on here. It says we don't have any sites configured. If I look at our database, though, there is a site, right? So there is a site. But if I look here, it's not even actually trying to make a request to look up the sites. So why is it not even trying to do that? This should be return await fetch API sites, use session, I mean, maybe I shouldn't be calling use session in here because it's a hook and we're kind of not technically in a hook situation. Let's just try that, see if that actually does something now. Okay, so it does. So yeah, I think calling use session here isn't going to work. We're going to kind of need something else, which is a bit annoying actually. Like in theory, these how does it use app state work again? Use context. So we kind of have a few options, right? We could actually read the app state context from local storage, but that is kind of making an assumption that's complecting different parts of the app. You know, complecting meaning it's building a dependency relationship logically that doesn't need to exist. Like our app should be able to work just as well if we just comment that out. if the browser doesn't have local storage or something. So we don't want to do that. So what we're going to need to do instead is have fetch API actually accept the app state or the session as a parameter here. And I'll probably have it be like a first parameter that's required. And what is the type here? Yeah, app state. Yes. So instead of doing this, it would be like this, right? And really, that would be something we could just put down here. App state question mark dot session question mark dot token. Right? And yeah, we could actually, let's do this. Const token equals this. Token. If so, set it in the thing. Great. So now everywhere we call fetch API, we need to actually pass in the app state. And that's something we can do here because like here we are in a hook context. So like this one, for example, already has the app state available. Not all of them do though. And I don't think this is going to be like a big disastrous performance thing. But I'm not entirely sure. Actually. Well, whatever. Let's just see how it goes. App state. So, I mean, the problem here is anytime the app state changes, this whole hook is going to kind of like reload itself. But I don't know if that's really a big deal. Okay. So with that, we have the app state being passed into all of these different things. And then we also have the use case down here where, you know, we would just pass in the app state like that. And we already have it as like a thing. Okay. Okay, let's see how that goes. Clear all that junk, refresh. So now it's loading the stuff. It did, so you see it did hit the events twice here. I feel like it doesn't need to do that. I don't know if that's because of the app state thing that we just did though. What if I change the look back, say, to 30 days? You know, it seems okay. If I change this to new site. That actually didn't update the metrics at all, did it? That's kind of interesting. So like if I change this to 30 days. Oh, we already have local selected there. What if I switch it to unnamed site? So, I mean, that's something that's broken. I don't think that's something that we broke though. But I could be wrong. Anyway. So if, let's not worry about that for the moment though. The kind of important thing is if we look at these requests, they should be including this bearer token. If I go into the application and delete this and refresh, you know, we get this. If I log in, we get this new, you know, what should be a new bearer token here. Is that new? FAD? I mean, it must be new. Okay. So kind of the other thing I want this hook to do is if the, so if we do like if resp.status equals 403, meaning there is no token or there is no valid token, then I want it to redirect us to the login page. And how would we do that? How did we even do the login page in the first place? I guess we would have to update the app state to delete the thing. Right. Okay. 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 Let's rework how this works a little bit. So let's make this a hook. Use fetch API. We're going to move this into hooks. We're going to rename this use fetch, or let's just call it use API. Use API. And use API is not going to take those. We're going to have const app state set app state equals use app state. So now we're making an actual hook here. And then this hook is going to return a callback function. Return use callback. And this callback function is what's going to accept the URL, string, and fetch API options parameters. And that's what's actually going to do this stuff down here. Okay. And that needs to be async. Whoops. Didn't mean to click on that. Go away. Okay. So then here, let's, oh, expected 2 arguments, right? App state, set app state. Yeah. And really this could be like app state. Let's actually do like const token equals app state question mark dot session question mark dot token. And this would only be, need to re-update the callback if the actual token itself changes. Okay, so down here, we now have the ability to actually do set app state. So if the status is 403, set app state, and this would be like a function, draft, delete, draft dot session. And basically what we're saying here is, must be optional. It should be optional, right? What is a type of app state? I feel like this should be well, it's called a maybe session. Okay, so we'll just say set that to null then. Right? So now the idea is, you know, if we don't have a session, like, so if we don't have a session, first of all, then our actual app component here should, in this auth wrapper, it should be like, oh, there is no session. I'm going to return the login page. But what if you do have a session that's expired or otherwise the server is rejecting? Well, that's where this useApi function is going to clear that invalid session out of the app state. So then you get redirected back to the login page again. It's kind of the idea. Okay. And now since we've reworked this to be a hook itself, we again need to update all of the call sites. So, you know, like this would be const API equals useApi. And that fetch API thing doesn't exist anymore. And what are you complaining about? Doesn't need that anymore, first of all. Return use callback. What do you mean it's not callable? Oh, that doesn't need to be async. That's not async anymore. Right. Okay. And then the options, again, can be optional, right? Okay. And, you know, we could call this API. We could call it fetch API. We could kind of call it whatever we want. I'm just going to call it API now because that kind of fits with the name of the hook. And here, you know, we don't need the app state. And if that was the only thing the app state is used for, then we can also delete that now. That's now being loaded as part of the useApi hook. So this feels like a much better sort of separation of concerns or whatever. Don't need that, don't need that, don't need that. This becomes that. Same thing down here. Don't need that. That, that, that. Get rid of that, get rid of that. And down here, that. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Okay. And get rid of that. Okay, so now we've got our better factored hooks, and we need to do the same thing over here. Again, it would be like const API equals useApi. This would be da-da. That would be da-da. That's not a thing anymore. This doesn't have the app state anymore. Now this already was using the app state for something else, I think. Was it? Yeah. So we can't get rid of that dependency there. But it's no longer something this use callback is dependent on. But this is dependent on API, I guess. And I should update those other ones now that I think about it to also include that dependency on this function. Like down here, this is dependent on API, API, and API. Okay. Yeah, something like that. Seems good, right? Just gotta, it had a weird crash. Okay. Cool. So now we've got our stuff, sending our authorization tokens. If I were to edit this, can I edit this? Can I edit this? Edit value? Yeah. To just make this token something weird and bad. Weird and bad. And then refresh. So we're getting these 500s. That's not really what I expected to see. Okay, let's fix that. Because we should be returning a 4 or 3 so that it knows to do the thing. So we're getting 500s because of this. This needs to be .nullable or nullish, let's say. Basically saying maybe there is no session. Yeah, so now we got redirected back here. And if we look at our application, it actually deleted that session from our thing. And if we log in, it puts it in. And if I edit this to weird and bad and refresh, it gets nulled out automatically and we get redirected back to our session. So our login page, I mean. Okay, that seems fairly good. I think we're making some good progress here. Let me do a quick time check. Got some time left. Okay, close those. So what next? Next, I want to do log out and password reset and all of that loveliness. But I also kind of want to fix the actual server stuff. Maybe I'll do that first here. So these routes are going to go up here into this one. And I'll put a little note here, begin public routes. Okay. That's fine. And then we can delete this bun.serve down here. And we can delete this because I actually want it to be port, not dashboard port. So this is just port. The whole dashboard port thing doesn't need to exist anymore. And, you know, just as a reminder, the idea here is because we now have authentication for our dashboard API routes, we can expose those on the public internet without being afraid of what people might do is the idea. And then I guess my config here, and like if I search for dashboard port, like where else is this reference? So this we can get rid of. And that's it. Simple as that. Okay. And then over here, you know, if I refresh this, it's not actually gonna, well, let's restart this. It's not actually gonna work because we're now in port 2000. Yeah. And I guess now I need to get Chrome to remember my stuff again because different origin, technically. Save. Okay. Sick. So that's good progress. I might make a commit with this stuff. So let's see, what are we going to commit here? I probably should have done some more granular commits along the way, huh? Let's start with the front end because that is the most obvious to me. So use session, use API, and hooks are going to be updated to pass session token as authorization there. For API calls. Okay. Seems good. Good enough. Yeah. Okay. And then on the back end, we've got these things. I'm going to commit these as like, and these, and this. Well, that doesn't really make sense. Whatever. Actually, let's just do the whole file. A little bit of a mess, but that's okay. And we'll just do all of these things too, I think. And we will call this implement user what do we got going on here? So I feel like this user password hashing maybe could be a separate commit. That's kind of like a standalone thing. And then everything else is implement session checking. Implement session verification and authentication. Whatever. Sure. Also combines servers. And then here would be like implement add password hashing. Okay, cool. So what is next? I think the next thing is going to be to add logout functionality. So we will do that. Actually, I need to move my laundry along again, though. I'll just be back in one moment here. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about the laundry stuff. I'm behind on my laundry, so I've got to do it when I have a chance. This past couple weeks, I've been like feeling like I was getting sick for like weeks, and then finally, I don't know, I kept feeling like I was getting sick, maybe getting sick, and then I just never really fully got sick. And I decided it's probably just allergies, but yeah, I kind of fell behind on some stuff. But that's all right. So login page, we're going to want some kind of log out functionality now. And one of the things that I've been avoiding so far is adding a client-side router, like React router, for example. And I've been doing that deliberately because it adds a lot of complexity to do that. Not only the dependency itself, but then you also have to deal with having multiple pages, which can be complicated in and of itself, and having the URL, like multiple URLs needing to serve the HTML and things like that. But at a certain point, you start to feel like, you know, we just need multiple pages. The login thing probably should be a separate page, if I do say so myself. The settings thing probably should be a separate page too. Like it's okay, it's fine in this little drawer, but it just feels kind of weird. And stuff. So let's do that, except I kind of want to Tanstack. Is there a Tanstack router? I kind of want to try that. I've never used this before. Tanstack router. Spinny. Okay, there we go. I mean, it's making it look pretty simple here. I like that. I don't like the way that's selected. I wonder, can I just copy paste this? Let's see. So let's go to our app component and just plunk this in here for a moment and bring this up here for a moment. Okay, obviously we'll need to install this thing. Let's exit that. bun install what? No, I don't want to do that. This thing. Okay. Tanstack Router. And then this router provider thing would kind of just go where we currently have home, I guess. And that goes away. And home would kind of go here, I guess. And I kind of want to make a new component for this, actually. Does that make sense? Router.tsx. Put that here. Or no. Take all this, put that here. And like export const router. This would like return router provider. This thing. Kind of want to avoid having like too much crazy stuff in my app here. It's already pretty big. Let's get rid of that. Put that in here. Add import from home. And then this could just be like router. And then this goes away. Yeah. Okay, so if we do that, root route is just nothing, I guess the nothing route. Slash is home. So route tree, root route dot add children index route. Okay. Router create router route tree. Okay. So I'll need to look at the docs for this a little bit. But in theory, what I just did should be kind of like a no-op thing that works. Yeah. But if I do like slash ASDF, I get a 404. Well, because I'm not serving that in bun, which is a whole other thing. But let's just see what happens. If I do server slash ASDF and then do slash ASDF, not found. Yeah, so I think that's the router now being like, hey, this page isn't a thing. Because bun returns okay, and then the router is probably like, I don't know what to do with this. Yeah, okay, that's all fine. So, we're probably going to want a login route is the other thing I'm thinking. So let's figure out how to do that. We're doing manual setup, obviously. We're not doing file-based route generation, no. We're doing code-based. And so the parent route in these cases, so in this case, this is something I was wondering, like, is the parent route of this slash about supposed to be slash? Or is it the root route? And it looks like it's the root route. So let's do that then. Router. So we would do another route here, login route. I'm sure there's better ways to like factor this. And I mean, maybe in theory, like the file-based routing is the way to go. Because that way you don't have to remember to update this file every time you add a new route. But I really don't like file-based routing a lot of the time. It just feels like additional magic that kind of trips you up. Maybe we'll switch to it, but I'm at the moment definitely not convinced. So then this would be the login page, I think. If we look at the auth wrapper, yeah, it would be this login page component. Router, login page. Okay. And then, that would be added here, I guess. I don't really like this either, because it's like, how come I have to specify get parent route? And then I also have to add it as a child. Doesn't that feel redundant? Shouldn't the fact that I added as a child here automatically mean that root route is the parent route or vice versa? I don't know, whatever. That's fine. So now, in theory, if I'm on the login page here, /login, I should get this, and that's great, because that means that this auth wrapper thing can change to be like, to not do this weird rendering thing, because I didn't really like this conditional logic here where it's like, render the default page home, unless there's no session, in which case render this login page. It looks like a different page, but it's still like the same URL. So anyway, we're gonna fix that. This is gonna be like so if there is no session, we're going to, well, let's see what Tanstack Router says. We want to change the path, right? And sometimes there's like a helper function in the router library to change the path. Otherwise, you can just mutate like window.location. Navigation. So there's link, use navigate, the navigate component. That's really what I want, I think. Return navigate to something, which would be /login, I guess. So that's like a pretty simple little thing. So now if I do this, I'm logged in and that's fine. And then if I delete my stuff, what is this set theme business? It's new. Delete my stuff, refresh so that it like updates itself. Cannot read property of null, reading navigate. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. Let's open the docs for that thing, I guess. Navigate component. No. Navigate options. Oh, it would be ref, not to. No. Oh, it's extending two options. Okay, awesome. I don't understand what it's trying to tell me. I'm just going to restart the server. I wonder if it kind of got the... Router equals use router, router.navigate. Oh, okay. I think the auth wrapper needs to be inside the router provider now, is what this is trying to tell me. Which would make sense. It's a bit annoying though, because I mean, kind of what that would mean is I would need to put that here, for example. Or in the home page itself, because really the logic of the auth wrapper has like devolved into almost nothingness here. But let's just try it like this and just confirm that we understand the situation properly here. Get rid of the auth wrapper there. Yeah, so now it actually redirected me to the login page like it should. And then if I click login though, what's it going to do? It's going to stay on the login page. In the login page now, we need to actually be like, okay, hey, the user logged in, time to redirect them. And I guess we would use a hook for that, the use navigate hook. Returns a function. Yeah. Navigate equals use navigate. So now this should be a function, right? I guess that's not going to work. Let's say await login, and then, I mean, should it be in here? In the use session, I wonder? I feel like it might make sense to put it in here actually. So let's do that. Where was I just doing that thing? Yeah, so get rid of this. Let's go over here, put it in here. Da, da, da. Import. And so then after we set the app state, then we would navigate to slash, just slash. Right, so now if I click login, we get sent over here. Cool. Just kind of making it feel a little more like an app here with these different URLs and stuff, right? Okay, so now we're going to want another page for the user page, we'll call it, or something. User page. And this will be kind of like the home page or the login page. In fact, I might even kind of copy the login page just as a starting point. And we're going to have our, our user settings. And we can get rid of this for now, right? And we can get rid of this, all this stuff for now too. I guess we didn't really need to copy that. Hardly used anything from it, but that's okay. User page. So this is like the user settings. Okay, so what are we going to be doing here? My AC just turned on. Sorry if you can hear that. So in our router, we're going to be updating we're going to be adding a new route, kind of similar to this. user route, user page, or yeah, user route. Fine. And we're going to need the auth wrapper here, and then this is going to be user page. And just like slash user, okay? Cool. So the idea then is like if I go to slash user, oh yeah, so this is kind of an annoying thing, but each time we add a new route, we also have to remember to update bun to be like, hey, you need to serve the HTML on this new route as well, because it's client-side routing, but we also need the HTML served from the server side on all of these routes. Anyway, so here we've got our user settings. Great. So now, in this user page, we're going to want to have the ability to reset our password. But kind of before we get to that, you know, by adding this multi-page paradigm, which let me actually commit this. So we're adding React Router, add React or Tanstack Router, right? And then we are, let's get rid of these unused imports here too. Yeah. And this is fine. This no longer needs that import. There should be no changes in that file. And this is fine. Fine. Well, yeah. How granular do we want to be with these commits, you know? Let's just not worry about it. So this is going to be add client-side routing with login page and stub user page. Okay. Okay. So the idea now is we've got these multiple pages, and we kind of need to start thinking about like what components of our UI are shared between them. Okay, so if we look here, we've got a header. And what elements of the header are going to be shared between each page? If I click on the user page, in other words, like what elements of this header are going to be shared? And I mean, looking at it, it's kind of like not much, you know? I sort of want to take, maybe I'll make like a header component. And if we go to the home page and we take this being the header component here, let's just do export const header equals header children. Return div children, right? And this is going to be a react.fc react.props with children, like that. So this now becomes a reusable header component that we can use in different pages. And we'll make another one as well for like layout. Or let's call it container. And I'm going to copy this and put it over here. And so like if we, you know, this here is the container. The container is kind of the element that wraps the whole application UI and makes sure that it's got some margin, it's got some padding, it sets the max width, and it basically just kind of like situates it in the page in the place that you want it to be. And this would be container, right? So now if we look at our home here, this could be like container, Oops, no, wrong one. Yeah, and this would be header. And then obviously we've got to update them at the bottom here as well. Container and header. Okay. And these are pretty simple components. You know, they're not really doing, like if we look at header here, it's not really adding any UI. Why is that? I guess it's just how it looks. It's not adding any UI, but what it is doing is organizing the elements within it in a standard way. And we don't necessarily want to have to copy paste that each time, right? So now if we go to the, say for example, if we go to the login page, this can actually use the container component in theory. Although it kind of doesn't really need to. So let's not worry about that for now. Let's look at the user page though. This one we do want to have container. And then we're going to have a header. And we don't really need the same header elements that we have here. Like look back doesn't make sense, obviously. This gear is going to kind of change or go away anyway. This dropdown obviously doesn't make sense either. What we do kind of need is like a back button, right? We kind of need a link from React Router that's just like got a back. And really, maybe we would make this like a button. Button as child. Do we have like a link button component? Link button? I guess it doesn't really matter, maybe. And then this would be like 2/. So now if I go like /user, there's like a back button, right? That takes me back to the home page. Simple. And maybe it doesn't need to be primary. Variant, what are the variant options? Link. I don't know if that is actually what we want. Oh yeah, that works. Well, kind of. Kind of want it to be more of like ghost. That was the thing, right? Yeah, like that. Okay. Cool. Looking good so far. Nothing in it, but what more do you need? And then in this page, we're going to have a form. Let me get some water real fast. Okay. So in this page, we're going to have a form. And for that, I'm going to go back into this login page and just sort of like copy this, all this junk. I really don't, I'm not a huge fan of how the form stuff works with ShadCN. It just seems kind of like pretty complicated. Like there's a fair bit of boilerplate. I wonder, I mean, in theory, I could have my own like wrapper that kind of avoids the boilerplate, but it's sort of annoying to have to write that as well. You kind of want it in your, you know, your component library. But that's okay. Const password update schema z.object. We need our z, zod v4, So the password update schema is going to have, because that's kind of the main thing we want in this user page, by the way, which I maybe didn't specify. But there's going to be like new password z.string. Yeah, just .min1, fine. And new password confirm. And I don't know if we really need to require them to like also put in their existing password. Sometimes that's a thing you do. We could. Okay. So, we need this import here. And we need this odd resolver import here. And this would be password update schema instead of user schema or whatever. Here we'd have existing password, new password confirm. And I guess we should import use callback. And this on submit, this we need to figure out. Let's just do that. It's not going to use login. Okay, so there's going to be 3 fields, right? One is the existing password. I guess we'll call it current password. Usually that's what we call it. Need to import this as well. Okay. And then we would have new password. And then we would have another one that's like new password confirmation. New password confirm. New password. New password. Right? And then we'd have a button that's like change password. Okay. So maybe I should make this like its own little component here too. I could call it like password change form.tsx. And let's copy just all of this for a moment. And this will be just the form. We don't need anything else. So we can get rid of these things. And pretty much everything else, though, it's going to have. And this is going to be called password change. And I guess I would call this password change schema. And I guess, well, whatever. Okay. And then in the user page, we would just load up that form. Password change form. That way, I feel like we're going to end up potentially with multiple forms in this page. And this way it kind of keeps them nice and separate. And we don't have to worry about having multiple use form hook calls in the same component or anything like that. Okay, so, and then the other thing is we could put in like a little heading here, like h2 change password or something. Okay. And probably this would be like, I don't think these even really need a placeholder, to be honest. Yeah, okay. And then up here, we're going to need to handle the confirmation now, right? So when the user changes their password, we're going to need to update the user. So we need to handle that. There's also kind of this error situation that I want to handle as well, where it's like, if data dot new password not equal to data dot new password confirm, then set error on new password confirm, and the message would be passwords must match. Right? And I guess we would return that. So now let's just see if that works. So if I am over here and I do like ASDF, 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 and I click change password, it does nothing. If I do FDSA on this one and click change password, I get this error. So that's kind of what I'd like to see. Okay. Then we're going to need to do something where it's like await change password. Let's call it update password. And this will take a existing password, I guess, just existing password and new password. And this would probably be existing password actually down here. And because probably if this is going to throw an error, it's going to be like the existing password doesn't match. So this actually needs to be something that we build, obviously, this update password thing. So what is this? Well, first of all, we need a hook for it. We're kind of building this from the outside in right now, like the client, and then we're going to build the server. So we kind of need a hook. It's going to kind of be like one of these modification mutation types hooks. You know, it's going to be like use update password. And I'm trying to think if this is going to invalidate any queries, and I don't think it will. And this would be like API user reset password or change password. Let's just do that. And this would be post. And then we'd have a body here, which would be, so this callback is going to need to accept a existing password and new password. And kind of one thing just to note here, we're not specifying a user ID or something like that because we're actually going to have to get the user ID from the session. You shouldn't, you know, we only have one user at the moment, but consider a situation where you have multiple users. A user is only authorized to change their own password, presumably, unless you're an admin user that can reset other people's passwords or something like that. And so we could accept a user ID and then check that against the session, but it's just rigmarole. What we can really just do is look at the session, look at the user in the session, and use that to assume what user we want to change the password for. Okay, so this is going to be existing password, new password. Okay. But this route doesn't exist yet, right? We need to build that now. But if I go back to where I was a moment before, over here, now up here, I can say like const update password equals use update password. And then this, well, oh yeah, this would be data dot. Yeah. So now this should work, you know. So now if I were to actually do this, ASDF, I'm curious if I try and do that, it's gonna, okay, complains at me. Then if I submit it, gosh, let's get rid of that junk. Change, so, you know, we get this 404. So now we need to implement that on the server side, right? So, you know, it's going to be something kind of like API, something like this, sort of. API user change password. And here, you know, we are going to require the user session. And this is a good example where we can see a limitation in this function already, where we actually want to return the session if we have one, so that we can get information from that, right? If we want it. And the session is going to have that user ID on there. So let's go back up to our function now. And, you know, get rid of that delete, obviously. So here we do like const user ID equals require user session, right? And then we can say const user equals get user by ID. User ID, I guess. Now, obviously we need to verify that their existing password was, you know, one that is correct, right? That matches what's in the database. So that's another thing we don't have a function for. Let's look at our user thing here. So we could probably kind of reuse this get user by username and password thing, but we're not going to, because that's an extra database call that's not necessary. Instead, we're going to do something like this. Export async function verify user password. And this will accept a user. And it will accept a password. And it's going to be very similar to this verify password function here. So similar that maybe we want to just reuse that. But I kind of like this way. So let's just see how this feels. So, and what does verify password do? Returns a Boolean. So we could say this would be Boolean. Well, promise Boolean. I don't need to write that in there anyway. Return verify password, and user.password hash, right? And then this is something we could actually put up here. User password. So kind of this way, the callers don't need to know about this detail of like, well, that you have to check the password hash property. They just are like, well, I have a user and I want to check that it has his password. Okay, so back to our server. We get our user, and then we say, okay, now is valid equals user, or equals verify user password, user, and then we need to parse our body here like this, right? Body dot existing password. What are you complaining about? Oh, that's not the right thing. What even is that? Oh, that's okay. That's a different. Okay. We want to get user, just get user. That was more something else. And now it's, there's a possibility that the user is null. So we would say like, let's put this body thing up here actually. Not that it really matters. Well, whatever. Let's put it down here. Okay, so it's valid if there is a user. First of all, there has to be a user, and that, right? Fine. So then we could say like if not is valid, throw new response. Passwords do not match or something. Oops. Status 400. Sure. And then if it is valid, then we're actually going to update the user's password, right? And that's another thing we don't have a function for, if I recall. We have create, but we don't have update. If we look at the session, we have an update here that we can again kind of just copy. Update session. Let's copy this and make an update user function. And we'll put it down here. Update user, user ID, user, and this would actually be a partial user with password. And we will get to that. User schema. So this is an interesting one because we can't actually just right. We kind of have to do the same thing that we did up here. And then this needs to be async. So it needs to return a promise. And then this would be like, we would need to do that same kind of thing we've done before where we say, which VS Code always puts in some weird autocomplete thing every time I try to do it. Data.password. If there is such a thing, then set this thing. Otherwise, don't. Okay. And then we need to import these things. And this needs to be user schema. Okay. Simple as that. So now let's go back to our server method here. So now here we're going to be like const updated user equals update user. User.id password is body dot new password. And we could also add something where it's like if not body dot new password or body dot new password dot length. You know, let's actually do it this way. So I kind of want these passwords to be like something reasonable, you know? And, you know, I'm not going to go crazy on password requirements yet. Like, oh, you've got to have one capital letter and one number and one character, like special character, and they can't be next to each other or at the beginning or the end of the string, and it has to be between 8 and 16 characters long. No. But we will at least have a minimum length on the password. So let's say export const password schema equals to.string dot min 6. Okay. If you want to set a 6-character password, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot, but I'm going to let you do it. And then when we do these things down here, like create user, we would need to be like if data or if password schema dot parse safe parse data dot password. If that's not true, so what does safe parse do again? Does that return? What does safe parse do? Okay. That's what I thought. It doesn't really do what I want. Let's just do it like this. We can even get rid of our if for now. Just say password schema.parse data.password. If that fails, it's going to throw an exception. And we're going to do the same thing up here. Okay. So then over here, we don't even need that because our updater thing is going to check it for us. Presumably, hopefully, right? And I guess we could just put this in here like that. And then get rid of that like that. Okay. So let's see what this does. So if I click this now, change password, it worked. And now I'm like, did it actually work? No, this threw an error. Too small. So Did it work or didn't it work? You know? Why is it returning a 200? Right? So tries, oh, because this is a promise. Okay. I kind of wanted to do this anyway, but let's just see now what this does. So now if I click change password, it's complaining it's not valid JSON. That's interesting. Oh, because it's trying to check the message, right? I feel like that's probably a good practice, actually. Like this should probably be, that's kind of a pain though. Because see, it's checking this, I think, maybe. Maybe? Unexpected token. Valid password is not valid JSON. What if I just did that? Get the same thing. So where is it trying to parse this response? Because obviously, so this, like you saw that when I changed that to remove the message line, like this syntax error thing popped up. And then now if I save this again and I do it again, that goes away. So this error is the syntax error. So that's being thrown from within this update password function, which of course is from this use update password hook, which of course is from this API thing. So probably actually in the API, use API thing, it's like down here. Now, I feel like maybe I should be like if resp.status equals, or if not resp.ok, return await resp.text. So now it's doing the thing, but it's not actually throwing it. It, you know, obviously. Throw new error, await resp.text. Okay, so that did the thing. Great. And so, and it threw invalid password, which, is that what we wanted to see? I kind of wanted to see passwords do not match. Why am I not seeing passwords do not match here? get rid of that period. Is valid user and verify user password. Console.log user. Oh, because that is a promise as well. Gosh, these promises, man. They're getting me. I bet that was it. So now if I click this, I get passwords do not match. And if I were to use the actual correct password, which is this thing, then I should get the invalid password. Yeah. And I'm going to update this password change form here to be like if e.message equals passwords do password. I guess it would be password does not match. Password does not meet new password does not meet criteria. Current password does not match. Okay, so I would just do something where it's like if e.message dot starts with current password, actually we could do that right in here. Like, let's say const message equals e as error dot message. And then get rid of this. And we could say message dot starts with, oops, current password. Then we put this on the existing password. Otherwise, we put it on the new password. And this would be message, right? So then it's like, okay, if I do blah, 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 hit that, current password does not match. If I do the actual proper password, which I need to copy again, then it changed. It's like the new password does not meet criteria. And if I set the new password to something with 8 characters, and these don't match, then I get an error there. If they do match, it should actually work. And now I set it to ASDF, by the way, just for the record. So now if I log out, which I, again, have to do by just deleting my state here, and refresh, then this should fail. And if I do ASDF, then it works. Okay, great. So we've got our password change functionality. Now, the one thing I kind of want this to do is like reset its state when you submit it. Like if this works and it was able to update the password and there was no error, then I want to do like data dot or form dot reset. Is that right? I think that's right. Slash user, ASDF, foobar, that's 6 characters, foobar, click change, and it did the thing. Sweet. Theoretically, it should pop up like a toast or something. I don't think we have toasts really set up in this yet. No, I don't think so. I mean, we could do though, right? Like there is a shadcn UI toast, right? That uses, doesn't it use like the Sonner or whatever? Yeah, it use the Sonner component instead. Okay. Yeah. So let's just do this thing. Dunk. Quit. Run the command. And then toaster, it just has to go somewhere, looks like. I'll put that in our app. Toaster. And just put that in here. Should be okay, right? Okay. Okay, so let's, usually when I do these bun or shadcn install things, I like to commit that independently. So let's do that here. So it created sonar.tsx and it installed dependencies, and that's it. So we will do add sonar. Okay. And then, we're just going to toast it out when the password successfully updates. Down here, like form.reset, and then it would be like toast. Password updated successfully. Okay, so now, if I do foobar, and then one kind of weird thing is you should be able to change it to the same thing that it is already, which is a little bit weird, but it's not like going to cause any harm. Failed to fetch. Oh, because I quit my thing. Right. Restart that. No, it should be there. Is it not there? Oh, it would just be like that or something. No. Let's just see how it imports it. It's using a relative import. Okay. Foobar. 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 Change. I mean, it changed, but it didn't toast me. Why didn't it toast me? Is there something weird with the? What if I just put it in here out of curiosity? Not like that though. Like that. Oh, maybe that was the problem. Okay, let's actually go back to app. Where is this importing toaster from? Okay, it's from UI Sonar. Yeah, I mean, what am I missing? Toast, toast, toast. To toast, to toast, toast. Toast, toast, toast. To toast, to toast. Do I need to? I don't think that should matter. Yeah, okay. I'm not sure. Let's restart this. Just in case there's some weird state thing going on in the background here. Refresh the front end. Toolbar 2, toolbar 2. Change. Why you no toast me? Why you no toast? Where toast? You know? I mean, I don't think it would have to go within the router, would it? What if I do that though? Where's the toast, man? Oh, it's down there. Oh my God. It's. I was looking for it at the top middle, but it's in the bottom right, man. Oh my God. Okay. So let me move it back. I should be able to move it back then, because I don't really want to put it in the container. I want it to be just like globally toasting, no matter what page you're on. Right? And then yeah, it's there. It was there the whole time, man. It was there the whole time. Okay, now how do I get it to show like at the top in the middle where I thought it was going to be? Position. You have to set the position on your toast call? No, no. I can set it here, right? Yeah, okay. Position, top, center. Okay, so now I should be able to do it again, and boom, it did the thing. Okay, I think that's good enough for today. Let us look at, so this is like adding, this is all just like adding, add ability for user to change their password. And that seems fairly good. Okay, let's commit that. Let's exit this. Let's push our changes. And with that, I think we're done for the day. Thanks, y'all. Have a good one. See you next time.